we're hearing a lot of noise from the media about, pharmaceutical battles. And frankly, people are just sick of this symptom-based medicine. Hello and welcome to the Weaponized Body Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Hewitt. And today I'm coming at you with a metabolic episode that aims to cut through the noise and give you real-world science strategies and tools to help optimize your health. And today's topic is peptides. So this is one of my new favorite topics. I've been studying these for about 3 years now, using these for 2 years now, and I've had patients using these also. So I'm coming at you with some personal experience, some clinical experience, some research, etc. So what I'm going to aim to do is teach you about what peptides are, why they're so hot right now, what are some of my favorite and most popular, different categories of why people are using different versions of peptides, maybe some of the benefits and maybe some of the I guess risks or the cautions that I'm going to give to you when it comes to peptides as well. So get ready for all of this information. So we're going to try to cover this in our 30-minute episode here. So we'll start out simply with what are peptides. Of course, at their most basic level, peptides are chains of amino acids, right? Then those are linked together by what are called peptide bonds. And these make up proteins, right? So this doesn't really capture, the magic of what these really are and what makes them so special in the context of human health. But they are the building blocks of life. So your body uses about 20 different amino acids to create all the proteins that are needed for life. So think of it this way. If amino acids are like the letters of the alphabet, then peptides are like words, and then proteins are like complete sentences or paragraphs. So when we talk about peptides, peptides are basically like, little versions of what builds up proteins, right? So there's, little molecules that in a larger sense can make up a protein. And they interact with precise targets in the body. Okay, so they're small enough to be absorbed, but they're powerful enough to be able to act like messengers for your body. So they function like messengers, peptides essentially. So they send signals to trigger specific actions. Okay, so actions such as the ones that are more desirable, like burning fat, repairing tissue, boosting things like growth hormone, improving insulin sensitivity, improving things like cognitive function, immune signaling, and so on. So, and these are the types of things that, biohackers or scientists, even doctors, researchers are interested in to see how these peptides influence the expression of these particular activities in the body. So if you think of peptides like text messages to your body that it sends itself. So they're short, precise, and very powerful. Okay. So it's very different than, say, full on like bioidentical hormone therapy. Peptides, they stimulate the natural processes in the body. Okay. So they're not replacing anything, they're just enhancing. Which is why when you listen to people that are very knowledgeable about peptides, whether they're scientists, they're doctors, or they're very intelligent and experienced biohackers, so you'll hear them say that if you don't have all of the things dialed in with your lifestyle, peptides will not save you. They are not magic solutions for biochemistry that's not optimized, in other words. So as usual, I'm going to give you this disclaimer that if you're not eating adequate amount of protein with a whole food protein-based diet, if you're not sleeping properly, if you haven't tried to optimize your sleep and make sure you're getting to bed, prior to midnight and getting restful sleep that's uninterrupted, and you're drinking enough water, okay, ideally half your body weight in ounces, if not more, and you're managing and mitigating stress, and of course you are strength training and you're doing some conditioning. So as long as you're doing those things, you can add things like peptides to help enhance your results. But here's the thing, if you're starting in a massive deficit, it's not a replacement for any of those 5 very critical things that you must be doing in order to experience optimal physiology. So now that we have an idea of like what are peptides, so let's talk about why they're so hot right now. They are they've actually been around a long time. We're talking the 1920s is when they were, had discovered these and started working with these, but more so through the 80s and 90s, and then today they are becoming very powerful tools that are being used in weight loss industries, for example, like the GLP and the GIP peptides that you know about, like Zepbound and Wegovy and Mounjaro and Ozempic, those types of things, those are peptides. Okay, they are mimicking a peptide in your body called the glucagon-like peptide 1. So they're agonists for those receptors. And what happens, and we're going to get into those a little bit, is that when you're adding these signals, you're influencing your physiology. So that is one of the reasons that they're very popular, is that people are realizing that these are very powerful medicines. And the rise in telemedicine has really increased and made this access so much easier, not just with those weight loss peptides, but also all other ones, particularly as doctors become more and more educated about the benefits of peptides. They're more comfortable making these recommendations. Now, of course, when they collide with the pharmaceutical industry and then the insurance industry, then you get a whole other mess of whys and what is happening. And I don't know if I've ever heard a very clear, straight answer as far as why there aren't more doctors prescribing peptides, or why that there aren't more health maintenance organizations that are covering these. It's very all over the map. So what I do know is that pharma definitely wants to make sure they get patents on their molecules, and that they are the exclusive companies that are able to distribute those, right? Such as the GLP and the GIP. So there's legal battles, Eli Lilly and others that are battling with smaller compounding pharmacies that are trying to prevent them to distribute their versions. So we're hearing a lot of noise from the media about pharmaceutical battles. And frankly, people are just sick of this symptom-based medicine. They're looking for other solutions. People more and more are looking for things like functional medical physicians, medical functional practitioners, who are going to look at more of the whole picture of the body rather than just simple systems. So they're looking for more root cause types of solutions. Aging populations, okay, are looking for results without big side effects, which I'm very interested in. That harm reduction is one of my primary, you could say, MOs with what I'm doing with Weaponized Wellness, which with what I'm doing with my patients. We want to majorly reduce harm and maximize the experience that they're having with their vitality, their energy, their health, performance, recovery, all these things. And of course, social media has made peptides very popular. You're seeing a lot of influencers jump on board with different peptide companies who are using them to market their products. And peptides are in a very gray area right now. So there's a difference between peptides that are FDA approved from pharmacies that are certified, general, so I think CGMP, right? So it's one of the certifications we're looking uh, for a pharmacy to be delivering products that are clean and safe, and also that are third party tested and make sure their batches are all certified and inspected. So we're looking for, so there's a big difference between getting your peptides from a prescription from an FDA pharmacy versus there's peptide companies out there where you can just order them online and you're going to see their research-based peptides. Not all those companies are selling products that are unsafe. However, it's important that you make the distinction and you make very intelligent choices. But there's a lot of noise on social media with a lot of biohackers that are trying to promote their peptides. But the peptides are becoming more and more popular because they're customizable, like targeted, effective when paired with these powerful lifestyle changes that I mentioned, right? So I'm going to talk about now the different categories of peptides you're going to start hearing about or that you have heard about. And then it's not feasible for me to cover all the peptides out there. There's so many. But I'm going to cover my favorite and the ones that I have the most experience with, and what I believe to be, some of the better peptides, as far as ones that are helping people achieve these particular things. So the first one we'll talk about is muscle building and performance enhancement, right? Performance peptides. So when you're optimizing, let's say, and by the way, there's crossover between these categories too, because muscle building and performance also, you're going to get, better fat loss. You're going to have better energy and cognitive improvements, better immune function. So there's crossover of these peptides, but the two different categories of peptides that I love in the muscle building category are the growth hormone releasing hormones, analogs, right? And then also the growth hormone releasing peptides. So the growth hormone releasing peptides are ones like you've heard the word ipamorelin or ipamorelin. Those ones stimulate natural growth hormone release without suppressing your own production. Okay, um, they act like the hunger hormone ghrelin. Okay, so they do increase your hunger, which does stimulate more growth hormone pulses. Okay, so what you're looking for is muscle gain, improved recovery, fat loss, improved sleep quality, and of course things that more growth hormone will promote, which is just anti-aging. So improve skin elasticity and collagen production and things like that. So like I love the ipamorelin as far as being a fairly gentle peptide on the body. And again, it's a ghrelin mimicker. Uh, it is something that does work very slowly, though. It's not something where you're going to take it, start working with this peptide and have results within 2 weeks. So it requires consistency. It requires that you follow a plan, and this one actually works really nice if you combine it with another peptide, which is also a growth hormone releasing hormone peptide. So this is like the second category of growth hormone peptides, which you've heard of, maybe peptides like tesamorelin, sermorelin, or CJC 1295. So these are growth hormone releasing hormone analogs. Okay. So these indirectly increase something called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1. Okay, that's made by the liver, but it is it is influenced by the production of growth hormone in the body, and this specifically helps reduce visceral fat. Okay, which is the fat in your abdominal region. This helps with recovery. Okay, again, so things like sleep quality, improved collagen production for healing, etc. So as far as where the FDA looks, how the FDA looks at these is they are approved for specific conditions. So things like HIV related issues, like muscle wasting and whatnot. It's got really strong data. You may have heard of a peptide called Agrifta. That's a tesamorelin peptide that is patented by, I can't remember which pharmaceutical company it is, but these are typically very expensive, and they are rarely, if ever, covered by insurance. These are peptides, specifically the sermorelin and the tesamorelin, that I have worked with quite a few clients at this point that have used these, and they are very effective for our strategies of leaning out, losing that belly fat, and improving sleep quality. I really love these peptides. I've also used these personally. I've used tesamorelin, sermorelin, and ipamorelin. And you can actually get combination peptides of ipamorelin, sermorelin, or ipamorelin, tesamorelin. They do sell them in combinations. And those can be a fairly effective strategy. Usually you'd use these in the evening before bed, because your natural pulsatile growth hormone happens when you are asleep. So you usually take this before bed, and it helps juice up or increase the signaling of the growth hormone to happen, in the night. There's also, some people that say they like to take this, fasted in the morning, also, because this can, during states of fasting, your body is making growth hormone as well due to the effects of ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. So those are, my favorites as far as, the muscle gain, performance peptides. So let's get into some of the fat loss peptides. So those ones I've talked about before, like the GLP-1 and the GIP peptides. So the semaglutides and the tirzepatides. So the mechanism of this is particularly the GLP-1, is it slows gastric emptying. In other words, it slows down the exit of the contents of your stomach, which reduces your appetite and improves your blood sugar. So these were originally approved for blood sugar conditions such as diabetes. And now they're used for both type 2 diabetics as well as for weight loss and insulin resistance. So there's fairly strong proven fat loss with these. They are FDA-approved peptides. And I've worked with people with the tirzepatides. I don't like the semaglutides. Those ones seem to cause more nausea. And, in particular, these ones have more side effects, I believe, and it's less powerful. The tirzepatides, have the mechanism of the GLP-1 and the GIP. Sorry. So it has like two different mechanisms that it works with. So it is more powerful, and studies show that there is better results with weight loss with the tirzepatides versus just the GLP. Now, I say this with a huge grain of salt that you absolutely 100% must be strength training, okay, and eating enough protein, which can be very difficult when you're reducing appetite. It's playing with fire. So there's some pretty cool things that are coming out with people doing more of a microdosing with this strategy versus doing the large one time a week injections of a bolus of this. So yeah, I've had patients that do both. I think that there's far less likelihood of side effects when you're doing the microdosing, and it's a more of a longer term effect rather than the one large injection a week. And the recommendation is that you increase your dose over time as well, which can increase the risk of symptoms. And those symptoms again include things like nausea, things like constipation or diarrhea. There's also effects on the brain that can happen. There's also effects with cardiovascular. People can experience things like accelerated heart rate and whatnot. Excuse me. So these are not to be taken lightly. These are definitely peptides that you'll want to consult your doctor. Make sure you're absolutely getting some blood work and making sure that you're monitored by a physician. I will leave you with this one thought, that there is another peptide that is called retatrutide. I do not have experience with this peptide. I have not had any patients that have experience with this peptide, but from what I'm reading and seeing, the future is in this peptide versus the other two, the GLP and the GIP. So there's a lot of powerful effects. They call this like a GLP-3 because it interacts with three different mechanisms. It is supposedly more powerful, and you get better results with than the other two peptides. So that one's to be determined. There aren't any FDA-approved retatrutides right now. There's no doctors prescribing this, but there are compounding pharmacies that do offer it. Mostly the research-only versions. So let's move on to my next category, which are the so we talked about the GLP, GIP, and the GLP-3s, so the semaglutide, tirzepatide, retatrutide. There's also one called AOD 9604. So it sounds like a robot or something. So AOD, you can just simply know it as AOD. The mechanism of this peptide is it's a fragment of growth hormone that's focused solely on fat burning, okay, or what's called lipolysis. So this is used for targeted fat loss. It doesn't raise growth hormone or IGF-1 levels like the tesamorelin, the sermorelin, ipamorelin. This one has mixed clinical data. This isn't one that is known and used quite a bit. This is rarely prescribed. These are out there, for people that typically combine peptides, but that's another, up and coming, and one that has mixed reviews so far, that people are getting results with for fat loss. So let's move on to the anti-aging peptides. So you're going to hear a lot about these, especially from what are called biohackers, or anti-aging experts, or longevity experts that are using these peptides. So these ones I have no experience with. I've only, learned about, read about, listened to, and understand. And these are ones that, I likely will experiment with. And the first one that sounds really, really cool and promising is one that's known as SLUP, SLUPP332. So this is a peptide that activates one of the master regulators of what are called your mitochondrial biogenesis. So your mitochondria are like those little power plants in each of your cells, that's responsible for your energy production, or what's called ATP. So it's a master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis and metabolic adaptation. So in other words, like, it helps rev up or ramp up your metabolism. So it can, what it's known for is boosting endurance, fat oxidation, as well as your metabolic health. So you'll hear about people using this for pre-workout, especially, and to enhance the fat burning effects and their energy levels during their workouts. So it's not a hormonal effect in the body. So what it does is it mimics some form of exercise, essentially. Again, these are experimental peptides. There's no, human data on this stuff. So I would take this one with a big grain of salt, but there is promising data with this SLUP peptide. And the people that report using it report fantastic results as far as how they feel overall, especially during their workout, if they're using it as a pre-workout, as far as their energy levels. And, it seems to be one of those that does work fairly quickly. It's not one that takes months and months for you to feel the difference. Another one that you'll hear about is MOTS-c. So MOTS-c. This one has been around for a while. I've heard about it. I have not used it personally. This one is also a mitochondrial um, peptide. So it's a mitochondrial encoded peptide that enhances your insulin sensitivity, and also your metabolic flexibility. So this is one that longevity folks are using for performance, for energy. It is a naturally occurring peptide in the body, so it's supposedly really great for anti-aging. This one's pretty hard to source. You'll have a hard time finding this one. It's under clinical investigation, so you're not going to find a lot of white paper research, randomized control human trials. So these two, I take with a grain of salt. I put them in my, my longevity types of peptides, the SLUP and the MOTS-c. But you'll hear about some folks that swear by these. They love them, and use them often. So let's talk about healing and recovery peptides. These are peptides that are becoming more and more widely used and well known. Uh, Specifically BPC 157 and TB 500. I have used these peptides myself and have had phenomenal results. So much so that I've considered, figuring out how to make specific protocols in my office, where this is available for people to use, as far as, helping them heal. BPC 157, you probably heard of, body protection compound. It helps with regenerating blood vessels, regenerating blood flow. So something called angiogenesis. This is also a lot of the reason that in my office we use what's called a shockwave, or a soft wave device, which is a sound wave that helps signal specific processes with stem cell activation in the body that increases blood flow, or angiogenesis. So BPC does some of the same stuff. It's a naturally occurring peptide that's made by your gut. So it does help support gut lining. It accelerates tissue repair. It is phenomenal for things like joint pain, soft tissue injuries, gut healings. People are using this for traumatic brain injury and concussion. It's a well-known peptide. Now there's two different versions. The one I've spoke about so far, those are all injectable peptides. So what happens is they lyophilize them. They basically make them into a powder. you reconstitute them with what's called bacteriostatic water, and you decide your dose based on how much water you mix with the peptide, how many milligrams of peptide. So that goes for the growth hormone releasing hormone peptides. That goes for, the weight loss peptides. That goes for the other peptides I talked about for longevity. Now, when it comes to BPC, there is oral BPC 157, and then there's also injectable. The oral, personally, really have I only seen people have benefit with that one for gut health. It seems to improve gut health. It is clearly the peptides, when you deliver them to the body, they have to be processed by specific mechanisms in the body. If you are processing it through your digestive system, but it's the digestive system you're targeting, there's benefit possible there. But if you're targeting other functions in the body, it can be very difficult in order to keep that peptide intact without breaking it down and excreting it. So to actually have powerful effects of BPC on things like muscle tears, tendon types of issues, or just even general recovery, I'm a more of a bigger proponent of the injectable BPC, as far as like the subcutaneous BPC injection. Now, you can inject this subcutaneously just in your stomach or in your leg if you want systemic effects. Or I'll talk about my personal experience. I had an elbow injury in the gym, and this was in July of 2024. I was doing heavy skull crushers, and I've shared about this. I have some neurological deficit on my left side, and is particularly in the C7 nerve root. And one of the branches of the C7 innervates the tricep, one of the heads of the tricep, and where it attaches at the elbow is where I injured. And this is what I'm blaming it on, due to the weaker side. I felt a pop in my elbow immediately. There's some pain. I had some major swelling days later. And over time, I tried to baby and heal it and use soft wave and all this stuff. And I ended up with chronic bursitis in my elbow. It just always hurt doing any sort of arm extension, particularly like heavy pressing. And I had this this chronic bursitis, or this ball of swelling on the tip of my elbow, for months and months and months. I waited, for some reason, 8 months before I decided to do a round of BPC. What I ended up doing is 2 rounds of 10 milligrams of BPC, which was about a 4 to 6 week protocol. I injected directly, under the skin to the elbow in the region. And within 3.5 weeks, my elbow was 100% better. It sold me. It was one of the things that, I needed the firsthand experience to really see the difference. And, this is something I'm a huge proponent of. It is more effective injectable for wound injury. The cons of this is most data is from animal studies, of course, but there is more and more research that's coming out for the effectiveness of this naturally occurring peptide in your body. Now, the second one you've heard of when it comes to the healing peptides is TB500, or something called thymosin beta 4. So the mechanism of this one is slightly different than the BPC. What it does, it increases cellular migration and tissue regeneration. So this is great, again, for muscle tears, tendinopathies, general recovery. It pairs really well with the BPC 157. The two of them together is what is widely known now as the Wolverine protocol. There are companies that sell these combo peptides together. These, again, are not FDA-approved peptides. There's limited human trials. So you're going to have a difficult time sourcing these from a prescription. You are going to have a difficult time sourcing these from FDA-approved labs, but there are some reputable labs out there that are GMP certified, that are, they have certificates of authentication, COAs, right? Certificates of authentication for all their batches. So there are reputable peptide companies out there, ones that I'm working with specifically, that can get you good quality peptides that are safe, in my opinion. There is one last one I'll touch on that I've used topically, and that's called GHKCU. It's a copper-derived peptide. You'll hear more and more about this. You're going to see this in a ton of skincare products and like hair restoration and stuff. I shared a little bit about my hair restoration journey. So yeah, check it out. It's coming in. I've had a few people comment that I'm looking a little fuller in the crown of my head. Thank you, Jesus. But I've used a copper spray, copper peptide on the top of my head in combination with some other stuff that I'm using that's finasteride and minoxidil topical stuff. But there is some really great benefits of this copper peptide when it comes to skin and hair and all that type of stuff, collagen derived processes. So there's topicals as far as creams that you'll see out there and sprays that are used for wound and healing, repair and things like that, superficial types of stuff. There are injectable copper peptides. I have not experimented with those, but those are out there as well. Okay, the last category I'm going to touch on is our cognitive or neurological peptides. So there's a bunch of those out there as well. And the aim of these peptides would be to increase neurotropic effects. So in other words, you're looking to increase uh, the increase the function of your brain, essentially, right? So the neurotropic effects, such as increasing what's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. So there's peptides out there like one called Cmax. Again, it's an injectable peptide. It's derived from adrenocorticotropic hormones in the body, or not hormones. So ACTH, right? So it's a synthetic peptide, and there's another one called C-Lank, which is known more for anti-anxiety peptides for learning and memory. This is also connected to immune function. So you're looking for neurotropic effects, so increases in brain health. It increases the production of what's called brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is really pretty cool. So BDNF is something that is actually produced in your brain when you do things like exercise. What it's known to do is increase learning and memory and focus. So neuroplasticity enhancement's another benefit of these peptides like Cmax and C-Lank. So it's known to help create new neural connections. So as far as memories and learning, neuroprotection, right? So preventing oxidative damage from things like stress and toxins, focus and attention, learning, improved mood, preventing cognitive decline. You could see how this would really improve like traumatic brain injury patients, improve sleep, etc. These are peptides that, again, are not FDA approved. There are some that we're seeing more and more from compounding pharmacies that offer these Cmax and C-Lank derived peptides. There's also different delivery methods of these. They're not all injectable. There is, I think, a nasal spray as well as oral. So you're going to hear more and more about these, which I think is pretty cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, let's wrap up with, talking about some of the pros and cons of peptides in general. The reason I really love peptides is it does help stimulate natural systems in the body. Of course, my belief system and, how I've always operated as a practitioner is always trying to get people back towards what is natural. Now, is it natural to inject a peptide into your body? Well, no, it definitely is not. However, the aim of it is to try to reproduce or enhance a natural process in the body. So in other words, it's not a replacement like a hormone replacement. It has, much, in my opinion, a much lower risk profile than, say, like exogenous hormones. I love peptides because they're customizable and it's very stackable too. You can, use these peptides in combination, and you can customize this based on the patient's needs. You can get these peptides through telehealth clinics. There's a lot of physicians that are more understanding and educated about peptides, and there are certain ones, like ones I had mentioned, that are available through prescription. And there are more minimal side effects, right, when they're dosed properly, paired with optimal lifestyle, etc. Here's the cons of the whole peptide game: is it can be pricey. So the peptides are not cheap. They're still experimental in many cases. And by the way, most peptides are manufactured in China. A lot of people didn't know this, but you're going to see in the near future, the peptide companies that are going to jump head and shoulders above the others are going to be the ones that are going to figure out how to manufacture in the USA. So a lot of these peptide companies, they will get their peptides from China and then they will repackage them in the US. So they're not in fact manufactured in the US. So you have to be comfortable with, something that is, manufactured in China and then inspected for purity, safety, and efficacy in the US. Hopefully you're getting that from, again, a lab that is FDA approved, has a certification of third-party testing like CGMP, and has a certificate of analysis for purity and content verification. So you want to make sure you're not fucking around with these peptides. You're injecting them in the body or putting them in your body. You want to make sure that they are safe and effective and pure. Uh, the peptides, again, results. I hate calling this as a con, but the results are subtle. Okay, they're not something you're going to get an instant gratification bump from. There's a couple exceptions there that you'll notice differences, like the sloop peptide I talked about for energy, but most of them you're going to need to administer for some time while you're doing all the right stuff to optimize your physiology. So it's not an instant gratification solution. And again, the quality control is a concern. I just can't emphasize enough to make sure you're sourcing from compounders that you trust. So peptides are not magic, right? They're multipliers, I like to say. And these, if you've done the work, right? So if you're training, eating clean, sleeping properly, these peptides can really help you optimize. I'm a big fan of them. I've had personal experience and client experience. But if you're looking for shortcuts, definitely save your money. I want to emphasize that, make sure you're doing the work, but also make sure you're getting foundational blood work and you're optimizing your hormones first. The steps are, you want to make sure you're pulling the big 5 levers, you're getting your blood work, and you're operating from a place of, data driven decision making, whether it's with your supplementation, your lifestyle, and your hormone optimization. Those are the first steps before you ever dip your toe in the peptide realm. Again, they're not cheat codes. It's a tool. Like, these are tools for, those who have earned the right to wield it, I like to say. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you learned some good stuff about peptides. As always, share this episode with someone who's ready to help upgrade their biology. Get some, data-driven facts about their blood work and jump into the world of peptides if they're doing the work. So if you're serious about using these tools wisely, make sure you're doing it with expert guidance. So as always, stay sharp, stay strong, stay weaponized. I will see you guys next week.